Welcome to another edition of the Hawk Off the Press podcast. I'm your host, Gazette Hawkeyes reporter John Steppe. I'm excited to welcome Eli Hoff, the Missou athletics reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Eli, thanks for joining me.
Hey, John, thanks for having me on.
So, first of all, looking back at the regular season before we get into Music City Bowl talk, 9-3 overall for the Tigers, 5-3 in SEC play. How would you kind of sum up this 2024 Mizzou season?
Yeah, it's a really kind of strange one to sum up because if you look at Mizzou as a program, kind of historically speaking, 9-3 is a great season for Mizzou. There's been even under Eli Drinkwitz and just his 5 years at the helm, there was a lot of 6 wins, 7 wins, kind of going into that last weekend, rivalry weekend, looking for bowl eligibility. And obviously 9-3 is not that, so it's a pretty good year. And yet I think the general feeling among the Mizzou fan base is disappointment. Partly because it's not what last year was with an 11-win season that ended in the Cotton Bowl. It's that Mizzou in this 12-team playoff era felt like it had a shot at making that. It had not an easy schedule, but favorable schedule, just in terms of being an SEC team. Had the talent there, all the results and all of the chaos and upsets that was the SEC. Like the path was there. Mizzou just didn't win enough. It lost really one too many games to have a shot at this. So it's I've been characterizing it as not a failure because again 9 wins, you can't call that a failure. Like if you're in Alabama or uh, Georgia, they can call 9 wins a failure. Missouri's not at that status, not a failure, but it is a failure to capitalize on an opportunity that was there. So again, kind of an interesting spot for Missouri, where I think morale's down a little bit, but in the big picture, still a fairly positive season.
And then looking at the bowl game, obviously no Luther Burton. How much different will this Mizzou team that Iowa fans see on December 30th look versus what they might have seen if they tuned into some SEC games in, say, October or November?
Yeah, it'll certainly be a little different as like every single team is pretty much in these bowl games. So yeah, you mentioned the big one, Luther Burton, the wide receiver. He declared for the draft like 2 days after the regular season ended. He will not be playing. Mizzou will also be without its right tackle, Armand Membu, who is another guy who declared for the draft after 3 years. He's also not playing. And then the only other true opt-out that Mizzou's had is middle linebacker Chuck Hicks. He's a team captain, but his role kind of decreased as the season went to where he was not benched, but only playing a dozen or so snaps. So that won't be a huge difference there. Starting tight end Brett Norfleet is out with a shoulder surgery he underwent, and the Mizzou has some portal opt-outs too. Some of those guys have been given the opportunity where, hey, you're in the portal, but if you want to stick around for the bowl, you're welcome to. Others have already committed elsewhere and just don't want to do that. It's been a lot of younger guys actually who've been part of the portal exodus from Mizzou. So I don't think it'll be too different. A lot of the core pieces, Brady Cook, the quarterback, the running backs, the other wide receivers, a lot of the defensive players, they'll all still be in the mix and playing in this game. So 85% of a usual, maybe 80% is a better number. Like 80% of a usual Mizzou team, I think is what'll be out there.
And then 2 years ago for Iowa, this was kind of the chance because of an opt-out for Xavier Wampa, the former five-star recruit, to kind of shine. And is there any kind of Mizzou guys who you think can kind of maybe a younger name to keep an eye on with kind of those couple of opt-outs at wide receiver and right tackle that could maybe be a player to watch?
Yeah, I think wide receivers the one for me just because Mizzou's top three wide receivers from this season are going away between the season and next season, between the draft and eligibility and all that. So it's going to be a changing of the guard there. Mizzou already has an incoming transfer who will come in and be sort of the wide receiver one next year. But there's going to be paths for these guys who are, wide receiver 4, 5, 6 right now to be numbers 2, 3, and 4 next year. So seeing what kind of work they get in this bowl game, I would imagine they get a little bit more to kind of make this a transition type game for the wide receiver room. So that's Joshua Manning, Marquise Johnson, Daniel Blood are kind of the three names to know there for Mizzou. Again, all their second year guys who had a little bit of potential as freshmen, have gotten some touches as sophomores, but will have a lot bigger roles next year. So wide receiver is the position I'll be keyed on as far as kind of what's next or the youth movement part of this bowl.
And then I guess maybe the opposite of the youth movement, in terms of Brady Cook, kind of what's the scouting report on him? What kind of should Iowa fans expect to see on December 30th there?
Yeah, he's definitely a college vet by this point. He spent now 3 years as a starter. He's going to be making not quite his 40th start, but he's getting up there in terms of games started. He's not a dual threat quarterback in that it's not like there's a ton of design runs for him, but he will run the ball. Mizzou will draw up or call, I should say, quarterback draws for him. He's had a couple of like 25, 30-yard rushing touchdowns on draw plays where there's no spy and he just goes right up the gut and nobody's there. So he'll do some of that. They'll look to give him the ball and have him run with it in goal line situations. He's not like a super big-bodied quarterback, but he'll lower his shoulder and try to push through contact there. He's got an arm. Arm strength is not an issue. Touch and accuracy on the deep balls has been a question mark all year. And then the end of the regular season was strange for Brady Cook. He had during a game against Auburn, sprained his ankle pretty badly in the first series, went to the hospital, got an MRI, and came back into the game in the second half to lead a comeback there. Grit, not an issue with Brady Cook. You could do whatever you need to, and he'll come back in. So he played through an ankle sprain. And then he had an injury to his wrist a couple weeks later that we never knew the extent of it, but it's something that X-rays ruled him out, which means a bone thing in my eyes, unless my medical interpretations have been wrong, and maybe they are. He missed one game with that, but then came back in with taped wrist. So he's played through two injuries. He should be healthier with a few weeks off here. So it'll be more of the Brady Cook we saw at the start of the season than the Brady Cook we saw at the finish of it. But bottom line with him, he'll use his legs when he needs to. He's got the arm strength. It's just a matter of if that deep ball is going to be connecting.
And then this is an Iowa team that has obviously done well when they can run the ball, 7-1 when rushing for at least 150 yards. Of course, no Caleb Johnson. So that changes the equation a little bit. But how has this Mizzou run defense been this year against SEC competition?
Yeah, they've been decent. Tackling has been a concern though with this team, and it's come up at various times. But the when it really was the most flagrant issue was Mizzou lost the game to South Carolina because of tackling issues. It was a close back and forth game on the road there, and they couldn't bring down Rocket Sanders, who's South Carolina's running back. He scored a touchdown in the final minute, or final minute, I should say, that was a game winner. Four missed tackles on one play, and he scores from 15 yards out. So that's something where that has to be an emphasis with any team when you're playing any team that wants to establish the run or lean into it to the extent that Iowa does. It doesn't matter who the running back is. If you can't tackle him, he's going to look good. So I think that'll be the key for Mizzou there, whether it's young guys or experienced guys, safeties, defensive linemen, linebackers, whoever's making that tackle, it has to be more effective than it has been at times this year. Otherwise the Hawkeyes will be feasting on the ground.
And then quarterback obviously has not been a strength for Iowa this season. Sounds like Brendan Sullivan is probably going to be healthy enough to play, but what will Sullivan kind of see from this Mizzou secondary?
Yeah, well, he might see some breakdowns. It's a secondary that has been prone to just some complete coverage busts that if the quarterback can keep his eyes up and downfield, he'll spot some of them. The Mizzou hasn't been a team that will blitz too often this season, certainly less than they have in years past with a new D coordinator this season. They tend to err on the side of dropping guys back into coverage versus trying to get after the quarterback. So I would say as long as he's smart with putting the ball in the right spot, making Mizzou make mistakes, there could be one or two chances that pop up for him or whoever ends up starting back there for Iowa if he's not healthy.
And then this wouldn't truly be an Iowa podcast if I didn't ask about special teams. So,
I respect that.
does Iowa have a chance to win the special teams battle? Kind of what does Mizzou kind of present in that facet of the game?
Yeah, Mizzou's been pretty solid punting wise. They're not in Iowa when it comes to punting. I'll say that. But
No
Luke Bauer, the
punting is
punter,
winning t-shirts in
no,
Columbia.
no. Though I will say last year's Mizzou bowl game against Ohio State was a punt fest for about 2.5 quarters there. So there is precedent for Mizzou getting into a punt battle in a bowl in recent history. But no, they've been pretty solid there. Kicking wise, Blake Craig, this is his first year as Mizzou's kicker. No shortage of volume. The last I checked, this might have changed with some teams playing in bowl games and stuff, but last I checked, he was tied for the most field goal attempts in the nation this year, which is a lot when you have a brand new kicker. He's been fine. He made a couple like 54, 55-yard kicks that were like, okay, there's something here. But then he's 1 for 7 on kicks between 40 and 49 yards, which is really weird. So he's someone who in the bigger picture they're looking to bring in some competition this offseason, but he'll be the kicker for this bowl game. So that'll be something to watch. Just anytime you have an outdoor game in late December, you never know what conditions could be for the kickers in this one. The one thing I will say, Mizzou was vulnerable when they played Oklahoma. A fake punt got him real good on that. So when it comes to Iowa's punting game, if they ever decide to not punt the ball, that could maybe be a factor too, because it has worked against Mizzou in the past.
That is if Kirk Ferentz doesn't call a timeout right before the fake punt happened.
That's
Like
a big if.
how
Big
that
if.
might have happened at one point during the season.
Maybe happened.
Yes. So we're talking 11 days ahead of the bowl game, so I won't ask for a score prediction quite yet. But overall, what do you see as the biggest factor, kind of the biggest key for Mizzou to be competitive? And looks like they're right now slight favorites. Of course, that line could move a couple times between now and the bowl game. But what do you see as kind of the key for Mizzou to take the Music City Bowl?
Yeah, I hate to be one of those guys who says it all boils down to mentality, because I don't like that in sports, but I really think it kind of does for Mizzou, just because this isn't what Mizzou wanted to be playing in at this time of year, right? They wanted to be in the CFP or in one of these playoff games, or prepping for one of these playoff games at this point. But at the same time, for a guy like Brady Cook, the backstory on him, he grew up in St. Louis. He grew up a Mizzou fan, going to games. There's pictures of him high-fiving players on the way to the stadium. Like, this has been his dream to be Missouri's starting quarterback. This is the last time he's going to be that. Does he just go all out because it's his last one, right? Like, there's not going to be a let off for some of these players who are in their last games. There are some of these Mizzou players who are trying to play their way into NFL draft conversations. And they're not opting out because they want one more chance to do that. So there's that element of it, balanced with well, this isn't really what they wanted. I don't know which of those wins out. So that to me is what determines this for Mizzou. If this looks like a team that's just out there to have some fun because it's a 13th game and why not play in it, versus a team that really has an edge to it because it's the last one. I think that's what determines the game, at least from Missouri's end of things. Because I think if they don't come into this with the intensity, it doesn't matter who's out for Iowa. It doesn't matter who's playing quarterback or not playing quarterback. Then I think the Hawkeyes probably win that one if Mizzou's not taking this one seriously.
Well, Eli, thanks for joining me.
Of course, thanks again for having me. Excited to see you down in Nashville.
Yes, and thanks to our listeners for tuning in. Until next time, we will talk Hawks later.